Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Helm developer call of Thursday, February 25th, 2021. I hope everybody's doing well. As usual, we'll start with announcements. So, Bridget, you had the forethought of putting that down. I'll let you speak about the next milestone.
I just wanted to remind everyone, milestone 3.5.3 is due March 10th, and we were targeting about a week before that, March 3rd, which is coming upon us quite quickly, as a date that we would love to have issues reviewed and triaged and PR'd into there, et cetera. So yeah, take a look and see what you want to put in.
Does anybody have any particular issues that you have off the top of your head that are getting urgent for the mid-March release? If not, then I'm sure things will come up as the days go by. Any other announcements? No, all right, so let's jump directly into discussion. Mr. Butcher, you have a couple items.
Yeah, I added these. I'll probably ask Karen to do this first one if she wants to, because I'll just mess up all the details. But we do have the contributor summit coming up fairly soon, and things are all falling into place. Karen, you feel like chatting through that, or you want me to?
Yeah, I can do it. I don't want it to seem like we planned everything already, but we are in the process of. It's just so the website is live. I literally just published it. So if you click on that link that I put in the notes, that is our event page. So we are going to be running our event through Bevy, which is like a CNCF. Well, it's a platform that CNCF uses for like meetups and stuff. It's kind of like meetup.com, but like a new version. And so Bevy will also host our event. So I think it has kind of like a Zoom integration situation, but registration will be on the website. And yeah, we are, not Tuesday, not April 2nd. It is going to be April 6th. So we have a little over a month, and it will be single track. And if you go to the event page, there's a little section that has the agenda. So we're going to do intros, and then we're basically trying to target people who are going to be totally new contributors, as well as people that we want to eventually become maintainers. Think of the event as like an opportunity to help us identify people that seem like they would be good candidates to mentor into maintainers down the line, to kind of help distribute all the work that we have. We currently have the capacity around like 100 people, but realistically, like we're guessing like half the people will show up, and that's kind of what we're aiming for anyway, around like maybe 50-ish, to keep it intimate and to be able to give people like attention and all that. So we're going to do this here, and then I think I was going to work with CNCF on having a Slack channel specific to this event. And yeah, anything else that I'm missing, Matt?
Can we start tweeting about this and telling people about it and inviting people?
Yeah, yes, this is live, ready to go. I don't think there should be much more changes. If there is, it might just be like slight adjustments to the agenda. But yes, please help spread the word. Yeah.
And then I think we still need volunteers to help run the workshop. So I know Taylor, who's not here this morning, volunteered to help run this session. You can take a look at the agenda and see what kind of stuff you'd like to do. And we can divide up the work and make it so no one person has to do all the speaking.
Maybe we should clarify a bit more of like what that workload will look like, because I think we were thinking of having like someone present, but then basically have like runners, right, to like handle, I guess, like side conversations or questions that people might have. So it's not necessarily like being on screen the whole entire time, more so like just being able to like go through Slack or something, or like jump on a Zoom call with someone who needs to troubleshoot or something. Also, I think the way that we're doing this, it's going to be more presentation oriented, correct? Since it's single track.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do we still need to look for people to do the presentations themselves, or be more TAs, or both?
Yeah, I think if you look at one of these sessions and this sounds like just the kind of thing you'd like to talk about, feel free, because nobody has claimed them yet. But of course, you know, if we have to, you know, I can do some, Bridget can do some. You know, we've got our fallbacks. But if one of these looks great to you, let us know. Yeah, and I think so. We had talked about doing it in such a way where people could ask questions in chat or whatever our feedback channel of choice is, and there would be some what we were calling TAs that would be able to jump in and answer those questions real time without necessarily having to interrupt the speaker to do it. And of course, if there are ones where we need to, but that would the idea was to create kind of a lecture plus conversation simultaneously kind of happening sort of feel, which is a little different from a workshop and a little different from, you know, a KubeCon presentation. But that was that was kind of one of our goals, is to make it a little more interactive.
I think most of the stuff is like all documented already. So like even if you're presenting, you're not going to have like a whole ton of research to do. So yeah, cool. Any other questions?
No,
there's no cost for this, correct? Oh, go ahead, Scott. You start.
You're right. I did race condition. Yeah, I just wanted to say I'm happy to help with the various stuff, including the charts and tooling related repos. I'm sure others will too, and we can help definitely spread the word. That's it. Matt?
I was gonna just point out there's no cost to this, correct?
Nope, it's free.
Free is good.
Yeah. I think I'll go ahead and
I guess what.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. You go first.
I just said I think I'll go ahead and create maybe a spreadsheet then, if you all want to break out sections that you want to talk about. And then yeah, I'll make this more organized for you. That's all.
I know one of you said that there was a bunch of the content that was created for speakers just so you don't have to do the research. How much of that stuff covered things that weren't Helm? Like the Helm.
Go ahead.
Or just the other things like chart releaser or I can't think of the other things right now. Not monocular, chart museum, stuff like that. How much of this covers those other things as options that people want to get contributed, or is this more focused on the Helm code base?
So it's mainly focused on the org, you know, basically the /community repo, the documentation repo, and Helm. We could expand it, but I mean, a lot of it is really oriented more toward workflow and Helm of the main projects. Now that the charts are kind of winding down or wound down, Helm is sort of the one with the biggest process load. So that's the one that's really kind of the focus. Do you think it would be good to attempt to do some of the others as well, or at least give overview material of them?
I was just going to
sounds worth follow-up.
Another race condition. I was just going to say,
race condition.
If it would, in my opinion, personally, not if it would detract from that goal. If it would help to give some more context about the whole Helm org and how the pieces fit together, and just have, you know, a smaller portion there where, you know, the biggest workload gets the biggest piece of the pie, then yeah, let's just talk about it and whatever works.
All right. Any more questions on the Contributor Summit?
Is it going to be video recorded?
I will make sure it is. Now that you bring it up. Yeah.
Okay.
Does that require some kind of approval from all the participants, or is just the presenter that should?
I think usually you just like announce, hey, I'm going to record, and then
Everybody shuts off their camera.
Yeah. So let me double check with CNCF if they have any guidance around that.
All right. Well, that sounds exciting. Dr. Butcher, something about Brendan's idea.
Oh, right. I talked to a couple people about this and thought I would toss it out here in case people are interested, and I will keep this very short. So Helm defines several labels that a couple that are Helm specific and several that are part of the general common pool of labels. Kubernetes as a whole has been trying to come up with more labels, right? And basically there is no org out there that is well positioned and interested in taking this on. So he said, we were talking the other day and he was like, given that Helm is now like how people author all of their manifests, might they be interested in hosting a sub project that was basically an exhaustive list of labels that people use, and basically how frequently they're used or what they're used for. App CRD got started 2 years ago now, and they defined a bunch of operator metadata in the body of the app CRD. And Brendan pointed out that kind of information in labels would make life very much easier for many operators, but nobody's ever bothered to canonicalize it. And he pointed to several different discussions in the Kubernetes ecosystem where there were basically just dead-ending threads where people were saying, does anybody have any recommendations for these labels? And then, everybody's like, oh, I do this, I do this, I do this. And then at the end, there was no conclusion. So I told him I'd raise it with people, and I've talked to a couple people individually, but really this would be the forum. If there are a lot of people interested in doing this, we could look into starting a sub project that was basically like labels.helm.sh or something like that just became a canonical reference point for people to say, what is this label used for? Should I use this in my chart? And I don't know if this is hip material or what. So if anybody has any thoughts.
I'll start with the first question. Do you have examples of labels that go outside of the Kubernetes recommended ones already?
Yeah, I have a dozen, but all of them are operator related. Like what team is responsible for installing or running this, and he sent me a list that he had been compiling, so I can drop that somewhere.
If none of that stuff's documented, having it documented somewhere, I think would be great. I don't really care where, as long as it gets visibility.
The number one first one he pointed out was icon. Nobody has a label for icon. Everybody has somewhere in there. Everybody has labels for icons, but nobody has a standard label for the application icon. So that was one of them that I thought was like, oh yeah, well, of course, makes sense to have a standard label for an icon.
Right. To put on my SIG Apps hat for a minute, because I still do SIG Apps. If y'all forgot about SIG Apps, that thing over there, is this something that would be better to expand over on the Kubernetes common labels, or is it something that we want to try to do here? And I'm fine either way.
I have no control over SIG Apps, so if you want to take it over there, that's fine with me. But
I was thinking SIG Apps because I think that it would also be nice to have Kudo follow the same basic ideas.
Will it get lost in committee at SIG Apps and never see the light of day?
No. If it will, I'll come back to this. So how about this? I'll take an action to take this to SIG Apps. Matt, can you send me the list of all these other ones you've got as well that people are using? And I'll offer to take it to SIG Apps. I think we own this documentation page in Kubernetes, and I'll offer to bring it up at the next SIG Apps meeting. And if it doesn't go anywhere, I will return it to here so we can figure out what to do next if that's not going to be the right place.
Sounds good. I shall send you a list.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody. All right.
Just to quickly touch on one quick thing about you asked about if it's good for a HIP. I think this is great for a HIP as like an informational thing. If this is some kind of, if it doesn't go to SIG Apps and if it just kind of drops out, or it's not something that they're willing to take on as an action item, even putting it down as documentation over there as either a HIP or even in documentation. Like I think we have some in the helm.sh documentation about like some label standardization saying about like Kubernetes SIG Apps labeling that's in there. I think that would be another great location just to drop this information for like conventions.
I'd like to see this information even at a higher level, just so people can easily discover it and use it. Buried in documentation is sometimes hard for people to discover. And at least with the ones that we use today in Helm, one of the nice things is if you use Helm Create, it sticks them in there for you out of the box. And so it's in the documentation, but we automated the use. Outside of that, in the broader Kubernetes space, a lot of the common labels have been hard, and I think it's because they're buried in the Kubernetes documentation. So I do like the idea of having them at a higher level, explaining them, teaching people how to use them, whether it's in Kudo, OLM, Helm, or wherever we have these common labels, because it's really great to build things like user interfaces on, stuff like that using. That would be great.
All right, any more comments on this? Okay, so next item, Scott, something about the SDK.
Yeah, so folks that are using the SDK and trying to, which people are, awesomely, and who are interested in adding OCI support are having a hard time. Basically, we have to, in order to do this, I know OCI is still an experimental feature, but in order to do this, have to really write a lot of their own stuff or reproduce a lot of what is currently in Helm's internal packages. And the question is, I do understand, I remember the conversations about kind of why it's still in the experimental phase and why they're not public. You know, we promise, we have Simver promises contracts with people, and we don't want to screw this up. My question is, what steps would have to be taken in order to get that at least public? So the important functions, and one was the registry client that was mentioned by someone, and in full disclosure, this is for some of what Flux is building in with OCI support, but it's for anyone, not just that project. So that's my question. Thoughts?
So I'm actually in the same boat as you, right? I'm working on something where we're doing a internal / third party directory where we're just pulling the stuff over. And that's not ideal. But there's two things that I would like to have before we move it out. One is I want to know that we have finished moving all the OCI stuff to the new user experience and the APIs are solidified. Because in the last pull request that we made, the API still had to change in order to support those. And I would like that to be solidified first, so we don't run into a situation where the API doesn't work for us to do the things we need to. And I'm not sure if that's done. That's something we probably got to talk to Josh about. And then the second thing that I only recently discovered that's killing me is Oras is a library, right? And this is one of those things in Go that kills me. Inside of their library, they're using Logros for logging, which means we're now going to have a dependency on Logros for doing display stuff and Logros for logging and things like that. And I don't really like that. I'd like to have another way of dealing with it, so you're not stuck to an implementation of a logging library. It's one of the banes of Go's existence is the logging libraries. And Logros is now one that is marked into maintenance mode, and they recommend you using other ones because they're adding no new features. They're only doing bug and security fixes. Because the author of it said if I were to do it today, I'd write it entirely different. So that's something I would not like to pull in if there's a way to modify Oras. Oh, I've got a third thing. I'd really like Oras out of Deis Labs and somewhere else, because if I'm totally honest here, it hasn't been very well maintained over there because the Microsoft folks who are working on it, who are not the folks on this call, have not had the time to be heavily invested in it. And some of the pull requests and issues are very slow to be responded to. And I would like to see that into a better long-term home before I am ready to rely on it. And so those are kind of my three things that are our problematic areas.
Yeah, and I can touch on a little bit from the Helm SDK point of view in terms of like why it's currently internal. And that's to protect from what's currently going on in the HIP process. So we have a HIP where Josh, a couple of other community members, and myself were kind of figuring out what we want to do before we mark the whole OCI thing as stable. And one of the primary goals with that HIP, if you look at the action items, is to mark that whole SDK as public. So there are a number of architectural things that have to go around in the background that we need to change out before we can kind of mark that thing as experimental. Farina touched on a couple of them there. Another one of the big things that we are still waiting on is the whole OCI artifacts proposal that's within the distribution API to actually become a stable part of the API. It's currently a draft, or it's something that is not considered a finalized project, which is why things like Docker Hub and other OCI registries do not support this whole thing because they have whitelisting, which is perfectly fine. But at the same time, not all implementations comply, or it's not stable enough for it to actually be out there in the reference implementations. The only thing out there is really Docker distribution and a couple of other parties that support it. So, but now we're starting to see some things like the Google Artifact Registry, which is, as far as I understand, is something that's kind of interested in the artifact proposal.
They already support it there. Actually,
yeah.
I think Docker Hub is the only one who does not support it today. Google is migrating from GCR to their artifact repository, and that supports it. In fact, early on, their use cases were talking about things like sticking NPM modules in there, right? These were examples in their documentation. GCR is going away in terms of this. And so that supports it. AWS supports it. Azure supports it. I think Quake, doesn't Quake support it? Harbor supports it. Docker distribution supports it. The only one that when I went through looking that didn't support it was actually Docker Hub. Everybody else pretty much supports it now. So
well, they don't really have much much incentive to share, you know. But in any case, yeah. I guess my big question is, do we need to what you were just saying, Fisher, because that was on my mind too. But like, do we feel as the Helm team, like just the consensus or whatever, for that we want to wait until that gets documented clearly before we even open up the functions? Like, for example, can we keep an experimental flag while still making the SDK? Sorry. Can we still keep the experimental flag and make those available to the SDK just under that flag?
So we can and we can't. The one part of it that we can, well, let me back up. To mark an SDK public on the Helm SDK means that it now has to comply to the contractual obligations of the contributing doc, which is backwards compatibility. Making sure that things that change are completely backwards compatible. So then people who use the SDK and they upgrade from Helm 3.6 to Helm 3.7, their SDK and the client usage will not break. There are some things that we're aware of inside of like CMD, for example, which need to change, which would not break backwards compatibility because we explicitly say that's okay to change in the next release. But there are, as far as I'm aware, the like internal registry stuff is mostly there and mostly stable. There are some concerns about some endpoints in the registry that might change over time. Like there used to be the catalog API that we relied on for doing version checking and doing like lookups. That has been removed in the distribution 1.0 API. So it's just more of like a mark of stability from the API standpoint that we can actually build libraries on top of it without breaking compatibility in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, I actually just realized. So just one weird thought: would it be possible to break that out into its own package, like its own repo, so that we could version it separately, like V1 Alpha 1? That's just my last thought.
I don't
Sorry.
see why not. And that's what the Oris project was kind of set out to do, is because that is supposed to be able to pull artifacts from a OCI registry. So that would be the right place to kind of move that forward if that was to be. And that's, again, why, Farina, you're pointing out is that it would be great to have that in another governing body where it could be in a more central location for those kind of like contributions to the community.
So Scott, how about this? Let me ask you first question. Do you have time to help put in to get the Helm stuff ready to make it public?
Yeah. So, somewhat.
Why don't we
do I have time? Yes, but I'll have some catch up to do. But I also have someone on my team who's been looking at it a lot more closely lately than I have. So we could collaborate on that for sure, and I'd be happy. Yeah.
Yeah, because I really want it out of the internal too, but I realize the hoops we got to jump through. So how about you and I connect offline and see if we can get the plan written down, and then people can start working towards that plan to move it out.
Love it.
All right.
Okay.
Sweet.
All right. Excellent. Thanks, everybody. We still need an issue triager for the week. And we've covered every point on the agenda with 2 minutes to spare.
I can triage this week.
Thank you, Fisher. Any other points for the last minute? Something quick? All right, so I guess we'll finish early. So everybody had a good end of the week. I don't know if who's on March break. Oh, actually, is it just Canadian or is it March break for US next week? It's not. Okay, so there's no
I
cancellation.
don't have a. Yeah, I don't have a March break either here. Maybe it's an Eastern Canadian
All right.
day.
Well,
We
I'll
just have
enjoy it.
Family Day, so.
But I'll see you next Thursday. All right. Take care, everybody.
See ya.
Bye-bye.